Okay, so we're talking about miserliness. So this is my book. You can't have it. Binding embodied beings in the unbearable prison of cyclic existence with no freedom. It locks them in craving's tight embrace. The chain of miserliness, please protect us from this danger. Okay, so binding embodied beings in the unbearable prison of cyclic existence with no freedom. So I talked about that last time and how important it is to keep that in our mind as the basis for our Dharma practice so we don't get sidetracked by little problems here and now, you know, not getting what we want or somebody criticizing us or things not happening the way we want them to happen. We get so sidetracked by those things and, you know, caught up in them and agitated by them, but actually they're not our problem. Our big problem is being in samsara, so that's what we should pay attention to. Then the little problems are, you know, they're not so little. Yeah? I mean, they're not so big. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, this is also asking us, well, what's at the root of our cyclic existence, you know? And from a Buddhist perspective, it's ignorance. Now, Saturday, when I was at this conference on hate, sponsored by the Institute for Hate Studies at Gonzaga, in one of our discussion groups, we were talking, and actually it was the dean of the Gonzaga Law School, you know, because we were talking about how people are so attracted towards films with sex and violence, you know. So the dean said, why are we so just attracted to this kind of stuff? You know, why is it we just like go to it? And one of the freshmen who was there from Denver University said, yeah, you know, those are the kind of video games, those are the kind of movies me and my friends, you know, want to see. We like them. So why? You know? So then one person who was a psychologist said, well, it's hardwired into us. You know, attachment and violence are hardwired into us. And personally speaking, I find that rather shallow. Yeah? What does it mean that it's hardwired into us? You know, does it mean it's controlled by our genes? Controlled by, you know, the chemical processes in our brain? You know, chemical processes and genes, of course, I say that, you know, there's a relationship between our mind and these things. But is that a causal relationship? Because those things are in nature matter or material. Okay? This book is matter and material. So are these glasses. Now you're going to tell me, and they're all made up of atoms and molecules. So you're telling me that a bunch of atoms and molecules are making me attracted to violence and sex? That atoms and molecules control what I'm attracted to? That doesn't make sense to me. You know, that just doesn't, to say that our brain and our genes are the root and this stuff is hardwired in, that that's the root of samsara? I can't buy that. Okay? So, you know, from a Buddhist viewpoint, when you analyze and you look at, you know, kind of attachment and aversion, our attraction to sex and our attraction to violence, you know, why? It's because of our grasping at self, you know. We create a self that is reified. We think there's a real me here. And then that real me needs pleasure. It's attracted to real pleasure. And it feels threatened, so it has to, you know, stand off against something else. So you get attachment and violence, okay? But what I think is when our mind, you know, when we get into the films and sex and violence or discussions about them, why are we so attracted to that? because they make those topics make us feel like we exist. Yeah, because attachment and hatred or anger are very strong emotions. Yeah, the attachment comes with the sex, the anger comes with the violence. What are those emotions based on? They're based on this wrong view of the self. What do these emotions increase and substantiate? You know, this view that there's a real me. You know, because without this view of a real me, we're not going to be attracted to sex. And without this view of a real me, we're not going to be attracted to violence. Yeah, what is it that makes these things appealing? Is because we get a big rush out of and feel that we really exist when these emotions are in our mind. So even though the emotions are unpleasant and uncomfortable, you know, or even if they temporarily bring some pleasure, yeah, they make us feel that there's this real I. And that's what we're addicted to, is this feeling of real I, you know. And we've talked before about how sometimes, you know, people can't stand a life that's just kind of going along in a balanced way. They need some drama. They need some real attachment or some real violence, something really happening, so they feel they exist, so they create some drama in their lives. So this is all, you know, based on this wrong conception of the I that we're so addicted to and at all costs are trying to prove exists, you know. So we love the feeling, you know. So even jealousy, it's such a painful emotion, but when we're jealous, boy, there's an I that exists. We're not stuck in boredom, are we? You know? So boredom is, you know, kind of unpleasant. It's better to be jealous than bored, because then you exist. Yeah? At least that's my observation, looking at my own mind. Yeah?
So then we'll have, as far as the increase of the intensity as years have gone on, sex, the pornography, the explicitness of it, the level of the violence has increased. Is it just that the grasping at self becomes even more rarefied? What's the reason for the increase?
Yeah, so what's the reason for the increase in our society about pornography and violence and all these things? I think because our mind, you know, they say this is a time of degeneration, and that means that people grasp at the wrong view of the I even stronger. Yeah, and so the afflictions become stronger. Yeah, and so then, you know, what used to be an up no longer is up enough. Yeah, so, yeah, right, making out at the drive-in isn't good enough, you know, so you need the hardcore porn now, yeah. And the drugs that, you know, are harder than before. And so all of this, you know, and the violence on TV and the violence we call entertainment is so much more explicit, you know, and it's a sign of the degeneration of our mind, of sentient beings' minds in general, meaning that, you know, the afflictions are very, very strong. You know, and we're addicted to the afflictions. And the afflictions, you know, if you're going to talk about the body, you know, when we have afflicted thoughts in our mind, you know, then the hormones start going. I mean, adrenaline, like, yeah. And then when you have adrenaline, you know, that's kind of goes right along with the big feeling of I, doesn't it? Yeah. I really exist because, you know, I have all this adrenaline going through me, you know. Yeah.
So how can we help other beings to really see that, and that they don't have to be addicted to these kind of rushes and
Yeah.
big sensations?
Okay, so how can we help other beings see that they don't have to be addicted to it? First, we have to see that we don't need to be addicted to it. That's the most important one. That's the big one. Because if we can let go of the stuff ourselves, then in our behavior, we model something towards others without even trying. But as long as our minds are so completely captivated by attachment and aversion, trying to help others is the blind leading the blind. Yeah. So of course, you know, I'm uttering some words, but the real thing is I have to work with my own mind. Okay? Hopefully those words mean something to you, but they're not my words, they're Buddha's words. Yeah. So the real thing I have to do is work with my mind.